Thank you for having me today. I want to just run through quickly some of the work we've been doing in two regions in South Australia, the Adelaide Mount Lofty Ranges region and the Illawarra region, looking at undertaking integrated vulnerability analyses in those two regions to look at the implications of climate change for natural resource management in those two spaces. Worked with Stephen Smith from the AMLR board, Jeff Rogers and Susan Sweeney from the South Australian Government in the AMLR, and Matt Wiseman and Neil Collins in particular in the AW NRM region. This is, I think, a very important message for South Australia, and it really kick-started the work that we initially undertook in the AMLR starting in 2004-2005. Which was that it's the Mediterranean climatic regions of the globe which are projected to dry earlier and more severely than other parts of the planet. That's an important message to remember because we have a spatial disadvantage being here in South Australia and reliant on that Mediterranean climate. The key premise of these analyses that we undertook in the Adelaide Mount Lofty Ranges regions and the Illawarra was that the decision-making to integrate adaptation into activities that people are really involved with is a very social process. It's not enough to know that we're going to be vulnerable, that there's going to be impacts. We have to look at ways to integrate that information into our planning and invest and get people active to adapt. Adaptive change won't be implemented in communities and organisations unless people recognising and owning that future climatic risk. So the idea of these vulnerability analyses are something along the lines of what Peter Hayman was talking about, which is starting that conversation, not just at a local level or an individual level, but get regional NRM boards and the people who are making decisions about how we invest, where we direct developments and other activities, to focus in on those key vulnerabilities, to respond to them and build resilience in those areas, but also recognise opportunities. This is a summary table. People might have seen something like this before. I've presented it pretty widely in this region at least. What you can get out of this is that some systems are going to be that the impacts of climate change are going to be quite significant. But there's a lot we can do to manage those risks. For example, in relation to water, surface water in particular, the potential impact of climate change in this region, the Adelaide Mount Lofty Ranges, is likely to be quite significant. But there's a lot we can do, and there's a lot that we already have done in relation to a desal plant policy to reduce uses, recycled water, etc., etc. Other things, the potential impacts are going to be quite significant, and the adaptive capacities are going to be quite limited. And I'd direct you to some of those because they're the really tough ones for us here in the Adelaide Mount Lofty Ranges region. Things like bushfire risk, the long-term change to coastal areas with sea level rise, etc. That's where they're going to be really curly planning challenges, and there's going to be a lot of contestation about how to respond to those key issues. With Susan Sweeney, we undertook a broader study where we started to look at more detailed analysis. How big is this going to be for different sectors? So we needed to inform those sectors about the potential risks of future climate change. We have to acknowledge that it's going to be a tough governance challenge. I mean, government's going to be making some unpopular decisions in the longer term to build resilience into our systems. And there's a strong need to engage, and I think we need to prioritise engagement so that people own those risks and acknowledge that we need to make some of those tougher decisions for long-term value for the state. In the Illawarra, we focused very much on the northern part, the Anunga, Pitjantjatjara and Yunupinjara lands, and we looked at the vulnerabilities. Again, we did a comprehensive vulnerability analysis, but what came through in the very strong message in those remote regional areas where Indigenous communities are already quite vulnerable socially and environmentally, the big message is if we can build their local resilience, we're going to be adapting to climate change at the same time. I thought this was a very powerful quote, so I'll read it out. Traditional ecological knowledge and land management is being challenged because people do not have the capacity to get out to country or the next generation to take on the roles of managing some country. In the past, old people walked around the country and knew the signs of changing weather patterns. Years ago, we used to know everything because we would go out in the country all the time and feel the changes. Now we're just stuck in Armata. We used to look after the country, but now we just look after the store. We need to understand country. People need to learn about country. Only a few young people are still hunting and understanding. That from an elder in Armata. So while there are going to be climate change impacts on remote Indigenous communities, it's the interaction between climate change, declining resource condition already, particularly in relation to invasive species, etc., and a really limited local capacity to undertake management activities, which are going to be the big challenge to those remote Indigenous communities in South Australia, which, when you think about it, contain and retain some of the most impressive traditional links to natural resources in this state. Our current work is looking very much at this idea of how do we deal with those curly questions, particularly as natural resources start to decline in certain areas. We're going to be retreating in relation to some of our natural resources. We've already seen some of that information today. How do we allow or plan for that retreat in our natural resource management systems? As natural resources decline in quantity and quality, we're going to have to start implementing policy to incorporate understandings of planned retreat. We're already seeing it in some of our irrigation systems in relation to a retreat from long irrigation lines in parts of the Riverland and in Victoria's facing similar issues. The issue of Goyder's Line that Peter raised. But we're also seeing it, for example, in coastal developments. We did a recent study on the south coast of the Fleurieu Peninsula, where planned retreat is incorporated into local government policy in relation to sea level rise in that area. The local councils acknowledged that planned retreat was something they were going to have to do in the future, but actually implementing that, the economic and political challenges of purchasing back properties, reducing the risk of that particular issue is very significant. We've also been looking at peri-urban land use, and we worked with a French researcher to look at how we can start integrating some new types of land use policies to better build resilience into local communities so that they can adapt to any changes. I think that's going to be a really big challenge for us as we move forward. How do we deal with the retreat in the availability and quality of the natural resources? This has been well published now, and I provide a lot of the resources on your USB. Thanks very much.